It is already week 7 in the NFL. We are already right at midseason, so it's time to start taking a look at what we projected at the beginning of the season and in the offseason, comparing to how it kind of played out here so far this year as we are in mid-season swing here in the NFL. I'm excited to do it. So today I'm going to be making a tier list video, going through all these tiers and ranking every single team in one of the tiers. I want to hear from you in the comment section where you would rank some of these teams and what you would change on my tier list. So please watch the entire video, see where every single team goes, and let me know in the comment section what you think.
I gave you fair warning, beware. Smack him in the corner of the end zone. It is up for the touchdown. Smack him in the mouth. I gave you fair warning, beware. I'll smack him in the mouth.
So anyways, we are going to get into these tiers, and I'm going to rank all of these teams. Let me go over the tiers first. At the very top, I have my current Super Bowl matchup pick. So these are the two teams that I currently think are going to go all the way to the Super Bowl. I will say before the season started, I had the Kansas City Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers matching up in the Super Bowl this year. We'll see if it's the same pick now at week 7 as I had week 1. Spoiler, I don't. Which is okay. It's okay to admit when you're wrong about a team. Making predictions in sports is for the fun of it. Is to try and nail as many as you can correct, but you got to understand that sports are pretty unpredictable sometimes. Then the next tier down, I have Super Bowl contenders. These are legit teams that I think if things go right in the playoffs, they can win the Super Bowl this year. Then we got the locked playoff teams. These are teams that I think are locked to make the playoffs, but not necessarily Super Bowl contenders to me, right there on the fringe or on the bubble. And then speaking of bubble playoff teams. These are teams that I think are just going to either just miss the playoffs or just sneak into that 7th seed. Trending up this section, I wanted to put a section for teams that might not be making the playoffs this year, but in their rebuild, they're seeing serious progress this year from previous years. So these are the trending up teams, because then we go to time to start a rebuild. These are teams, and there might be some hot takes on this one, that need to rip off the Band-Aid, ship out their quarterback, and start a rebuild and completely go into rebuild mode and start acquiring draft capital. But some of these teams might not have accepted it yet, whether they have veteran quarterbacks that are aging, or they have a defense that couldn't stop a toddler running up the A-gap. These are teams that need to start a rebuild. They don't have much direction, and they're not going to get much further with the guys they currently have. So it's time to completely bring it down and start over. And then the gray section at the very bottom are teams in a rebuild currently, not expecting much from this season, and they're kind of bad as expected because they're rebuilding. Everyone's going to fit into a category, and we're going to go through every single team one by one. But first, help me out. It takes 2 seconds. It takes me about an hour to make this video, and it takes you 2 seconds to like this video and to subscribe and turn on notifications if you're already not subscribed and notifications on. We noticed that a lot of our viewers, and when I say a lot, like 85% of our viewers are actually not subscribed to the channel, which is kind of painful. We're trying really hard. Anyways, let's get into these tiers, and first up, the Tennessee Titans. Titan fans got to be feeling good after that big victory against the Buffalo Bills this last weekend. Derrick Henry has been absolutely going off this year. Quite honestly, at an unbelievable rate if you really look at it. I'm going to put the Titans into a locked playoff team. I think there is a small chance that the Colts sneak back into the picture to win this division, but overall the division is soft, the division is weak, and it's full of weak defenses in Jacksonville and in Houston, and the Colts haven't been perfect them damn selves, so this Tennessee run game should work in the games against their division at the very minimum. And then they also have like really good a really good matchup versus teams like the Chiefs and the Bills to keep the ball out of the offense's hands with Derrick Henry's superpowers that he possesses. Locked playoff team, but I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender, because there's going to come a point where they're going to need their defense to step up, and I'm not sure if I have confidence the Titans defense would step up in a big playoff game against Kansas City, against Buffalo, against Baltimore, or against Los Angeles. And I say the Los Angeles Chargers for the AFC, obviously. The Super Bowl contenders to me are going to be teams that I think can win the AFC and NFC this year. Next up, we have the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to go in order here, so as you see your team pop into this little queue, you're going to know your team's coming up next. Next up, we got the Miami Dolphins, and I should add another category for the Dolphins. In a rebuild, but in a failing rebuild, The Dolphins are still in a rebuild to me. I did not have anywhere near playoffs on the mind for this team. I actually had them winning 7 games, I believe, this year in the preseason projections for the Dolphins. And a lot of it does come from the source that I think Tua has a lot more time to develop, and Tua needs more time to develop, like a couple more years to develop. But the roster around him is also super young, so there's all that combined. I expected a disappointing season from the Miami Dolphins, and I don't know if I would have called 1-5. Like, this is getting pretty miserable, and losing to the Jaguars in the mornings on Sundays every weekend. But yeah, I got the Dolphins in a rebuild still, but kind of failing in this rebuild. The second they pull the trigger and trade for Deshaun Watson, they are going to be expected to be in this category somewhere, and if they are not, they are failing. The Browns are actually going to be in the bubble playoff team section. This is kind of a surprise. I think I had a 12-win projection or something like that on the Browns. I mean, injuries have absolutely ravished this Browns team, and then they lost that big game to the Chargers where the Chargers put up almost 50 points on them, and the Browns put up almost 40 points on the Chargers. So you have a situation where that could have been a win. The Browns also lost that really close game to Kansas City. That could have been a win. But here the Browns are. They did just beat the Denver Broncos last night on Thursday night with Case Keenum as their backup. That really was like a treading water win. Like, we just need to get to the next week, and we need this W. We need to stay above 500. I think that the Browns are still going to be a wild card team, but if they continue to suffer injuries, and if Baker Mayfield doesn't get out there soon, secondary continues to struggle to stay healthy also, they could slide right out of there, because there's another team in here I want to talk about that may take their spot in the playoffs. No spoilers, I promise. Jacksonville Jaguars, they're obviously still in a rebuild. They got a rookie quarterback at the helm and a team around him that is not ready to compete with almost any NFL team in the league right now. They did just beat the Miami Dolphins, but I mean, that's a battle of two teams that are in rebuilds. They're both 1-5 right now. Trevor Lawrence is improving, however. Now, the coaching situation, I don't know if they want to rip that Band-Aid off now and call it one and done. I didn't defend Urban Meyer, but I wasn't like immediate to hit the he's not going to make it through the first year button. And people who did say that I thought was a little bit crazy, because usually coaches get a couple years even if they're bad. But he's pretty miserably bad, so you guys had, you had something there. You definitely did. Lions, they're obviously in a rebuild. The Vikings, I think the Vikings are also a bubble playoff team. They've played every single game close, it seems like, and it's been a field goal miss or a penalty or a dropped pass away from winning games or losing games every single weekend for the Minnesota Vikings. But when this team plays their best, they can play up to any team. The only unfortunate thing is, and the reason I don't have them locked as a wild card team, is because they also play down to teams. And they also play bad teams close as well. So we'll see how the Vikings do for the rest of the season. I'm very interested in the Vikings this year. They could be one of those teams that sneak in at the 7th seed and upset a team in the first round, possibly, with Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and company. The Buccaneers are obviously Super Bowl contenders. I do not have the Buccaneers in my current Super Bowl matchup pick right now. They're obviously contending for the Super Bowl, 5-1. They're going to play Chicago this week and probably improve to 6-1. And Tom Brady is playing as good as he ever has played, which doesn't make any damn sense. And it's not that it doesn't make sense, because obviously I know who Tom Brady is and I know what Tom Brady does. The part that doesn't make sense to me is that as he ages, somehow he's getting better, and just biologically and just science says that that doesn't really make much sense. So, I mean, if it continues, into his late 40s and he continues to get better, time to start raising some questions. If vampires do exist, lizard people, it's time to start speculating on Tom Brady, is what I'm saying, with conspiracies, with crazy stuff. Because what he's doing right now is pretty impossible and a little bit crazy. 49ers, this is tough for me to say, but I think the 49ers playoffs hopes are done. But with the young quarterback Trey Lance kind of developing, and them still having a very young and hungry roster that they can continue to build around, I'm going to put them in the trending up category. I don't think they need to start a rebuild, and I don't think that they're in their rebuild still. I think they're at a category now where it's just they're waiting for a quarterback to develop behind Jimmy G, and then they're going to be ready to be off to the races once again. I don't think they make the playoffs this year. It's just too tough. I actually had them losing to the Indianapolis Colts this weekend. But I do think the 49ers have reason to feel good, reason to be in this trending up category, because I feel good about Trey Lance, even though he's very raw and everything that was a problem with the inexperience and just coming in and being a guy that's depending mostly on athleticism in his first year of his career has been true what we've said about Trey Lance in the preseason and offseason talks and why Jimmy G is still on this team. But there definitely is promise there. And if you tell me there isn't, you're not watching Trey Lance. There's some promise there. The Bengals. As long as the Bengals stay healthy, I would be ready to lock them into the playoffs. That's how good they're playing right now. But I am concerned. Joe Burrow is still taking a lot of hits so far this year, so I am a little concerned about that. And the defense is overperforming. They're eventually going to stop overperforming. And the question is, will the Bengals go on a losing skid when that day comes that the defense stops overperforming? We're going to see a real test for them. We saw it last week. They competed with Green Bay. But we're going to see a real test for them when they play Baltimore this weekend. Let's see if they're ready to actually be a playoff team. Even if they lose that game but look really good during it, that'll help me move them up one tier. I'm so close to doing it, though. And I think if I had to put some money down right now, I may take the Bengals over the Browns to make the playoffs for sure. And I think maybe there's a chance that both teams can still make it. The Falcons, it's time to start a rebuild. And I put them in this category, not in a rebuild. They're in a semi-rebuild. They traded out Julio Jones, which would signify that they're entering a rebuild. But until Matt Ryan is out of there, until they get rid of that quarterback, that's just going to keep them average or keep them just below 500. I don't think it's a full-blown rebuild yet. So time to start a rebuild, time to rip off that Matt Ryan Band-Aid. He had a great run with Atlanta. It sucks they didn't win the Super Bowl that one year. They had the shot at it. But it's time to accept reality. Time to start a rebuild for the Falcons. Baltimore Ravens, locked playoff team, Super Bowl contenders. I've got the Baltimore Ravens playing in the Super Bowl as of right now for the AFC. I think this is the year. This is the perfect year for the Lamar Jackson style of offense to take over. For one, all these guys that are hurt right now on the offensive side of the ball are going to come back around playoff time and have fresh legs and be healthy and ready to go. And that's only going to help Lamar Jackson, who's already balling and playing at an MVP level at this very moment. For two, the teams that they have to see in the playoffs are kind of their dream scenarios. We just saw Buffalo give up crazy rushing numbers to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry just completely took over that game. We know what Baltimore's rush offense can do, and we saw what they did to the LA Chargers with backup O-linemen and backup running backs. So that matchup against Buffalo, Baltimore could take that, and it would be a close game. I'm not saying it wouldn't be. But with Lamar's improvement as a passer, it's not completely solely on the run, but to still have that run threat, and now you also have the threat to be able to throw downfield to Marquise Brown and these guys who are breaking out this year. The Baltimore Ravens match up well against the Bills. And the Chiefs have all the same problems that the Bills have, but times 2 or times 3. You know what I mean? Like the run defense is even worse, and the way you beat them is to control the time of possession, keep the ball on your side, and win the shootout, basically, is what you're trying to do. Baltimore this year is built to do it. I don't think that Lamar Jackson's style or the way that their offense is ran is built to consistently win the Super Bowl year after year after year and consistently be playing for the Super Bowl year after year like the Chiefs and like the Bucks and like the Bills are, I think, in the future. But I think for this specific year, the way the matchups are looking in Week 7, if I had to pick a team to make the run, it's the Baltimore Ravens. And they're 5-1, so they possibly could get a high seed and be playing a lot of those playoff games at home as well. Chicago Bears. They are kind of a bubble playoff team, but I'm not really going to put them there. I'm going to put them in the trending up category. Same thing with the 49ers. They found a young quarterback that's showing some promise and has some kind of direction for the team to head in and build around. They got to do a lot more work, obviously, but the defense is still playing well. This team is a 500 team this year again, and they do this year in, year out, and we always doubt them, and we think they're going to just completely fail and be a top 10 overall pick in the next draft, but they just somehow stay decent, and they somehow keep making the playoffs. So maybe they are a bubble playoff team, but I think that they're a team that's trending up. Cowboys, you guys know how much I love to support the Cowboys. I want to bump them in the Super Bowl contenders list, but I'm going to keep them in as locked playoff teams. I think they're locked to win their division. I think they're going to compete in the playoffs, but when it comes down to it, the Rams, the Buccaneers, the Cardinals are tough. I would take the Cowboys to beat the Cardinals. We don't know what it's going to look like come playoff time. Those three teams, Dallas is going to have to beat if they're a 4 seed or if they're a 3 seed, back-to-back rounds. And I don't see it happening. I don't see them going on that kind of a run and going all the way. And my actual Super Bowl pick is also in the mix, and your guys are about to get spoiled to that here pretty soon. Houston Texans in a rebuild, kinda. I mean, what do you call what they're doing right now? They're just like cashing checks of being an NFL team. I don't know what they're doing. They just keep sending out terrible teams year after year after year, ever since they traded out D-Hop in them. And it's kind of sad, honestly. It's kind of sad. This team had some promise with the Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and J.J. Watt all together. Indianapolis Colts. I actually think the Colts deserve to be in this playoff bubble team. I know that they're 2-4 and they're trending down. If they lose to San Francisco, then that's bad, obviously, and you're going to get knocked down. I don't even know if you'd be in the trending up. You'd probably be in the start of rebuild phase. I didn't give myself like room to put teams in like a no-take zone, which is where the Colts would be, and is where I think the Bears would be, where it's just like I don't really have any feelings towards them. I think they're average, and they're going to be average, and they don't necessarily need to completely blow it up, but they don't necessarily need to keep the same team back again in 2022. But I think the Colts have a chance to sneak into the wild card picture and sneak into the division picture as their schedule lightens up. They've had a brutal schedule, and they've played some of these good teams really close. Rams, Super Bowl pick? No. I was really high on the Super Bowl Rams party in the offseason. I couldn't decide on the NFC, and I went back and forth on the NFC with the Buccaneers and the Rams and the Packers and other teams as well. NFC pick, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The Rams are definitely Super Bowl contenders this year. Combine the defense with the offensive of firepower and the Matthew Stafford coming to this offense and being the perfect plug and play for Sean McVay. This team's really special. This team's really good and really well built and well rounded. Chargers. Put my own team in the locked playoff category, first in the AFC West right now. Just got beat down by the Baltimore Ravens, but like I said, for one, they're my Super Bowl matchup pick for the AFC. And again, that's another team the Chargers just aren't going to match up well against. They can't stop the run, and the Baltimore Ravens run the ball very well. They also control the time possession and keep the ball out of their greatest strength, which is number 10 on the other side of the ball on offense. So, I mean, the Baltimore Ravens match up really well against them. And so did the Cleveland Browns. But the Baltimore Ravens defense came to play. Same thing with the Kansas City Chiefs. They're either going to win the division or they're going to be a very high wild card seed. But they are sliding, and I'm not going to put them in the Super Bowl contenders box right now. Because the defense is so bad that I really think that if they saw, like, say they get the 7th seed or they get the 6th seed, and they've got to play against the Bills in round 1, they're a first-round exit. Or say they end up, squeaking out the division lead and they got to play a healthy Browns team in round 1, they might be a first-round exit. And if anything, I think the Chiefs don't even make the AFC Championship this year with how bad the defense has been. And then you combine that, Mahomes has had a turnover bug. And turnover bugs aren't easy to just turn off. It's just going to continue until something clicks, and it may take an offseason for that something to click. This isn't the Chiefs' year, in my opinion, and they were my preseason Super Bowl pick. So this is me kind of admitting that I was wrong about my AFC pick. Now, if they still go, I'm still going to brag about predicting them to go to the Super Bowl, trust me. And we'll just delete this video or delete this part of the video. Next up, we got the New Orleans Saints, and I want to put them in the bubble playoff category. I was really... Dookie. That's my dog waking up. Good morning. I'm going to put them in the trending up category just because this team is overperforming what I expected them to do, and I don't think they need to start a full rebuild. Jameis Winston has flashes of what shows to be improvement from his time in Tampa Bay, and he's still kind of a young guy, so he could be a guy that they build around and they potentially push to be a bubble playoff team here in the near future still. You can tell that the team around him is still well built because they still do have games where they look like a playoff team. They look like a contender in the NFC, and I wouldn't be surprised if they stole one from Tampa Bay this year. I am calling for this. This is kind of crazy. This is a little bit of a crazy take, and I said it in the last video. I want the Saints, especially if Tua gets dealt in the offseason, doesn't get dealt before the deadline. Before the deadline, obviously, you can't do it. But if Tua's on the Dolphins team and is up for trade in the offseason this year, I think the Saints should go for him. I think that he'd be the perfect fit for Sean Payton and that offense and for that team in general. New York Giants, time to start a rebuild. Whatever is going on in New York has failed. Kenny Golladay has failed. Daniel Jones has failed. Saquon Barkley can't stay on the field, and he's just on and off the field. It seems like every time he gets back out there, he gets hurt immediately almost again. Now you lost Blake Martinez. The defense isn't playing so well. It's time to blow the Giants up, who were just recently blown up, and start that rebuild up again. And I don't think that they're in a rebuild because they went a direction and they thought that Daniel Jones was a franchise quarterback. He got taken like 6th overall or something like that. So they're not currently in a rebuild. Don't give me that. This team was a team that all the Giants fans said was going to win the NFC East this year, and they're not even in contention for it. And they're really, 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 really bad. One of the worst teams in the league. Now the Eagles, I'm actually going to put the Eagles in the trending up category. While they are in a rebuild still at this very moment, you see the Zach Ertz trade going down. I think they have a direction with Jalen Hurts. Now, he hasn't been absolutely amazing, but he's been a guy where it's like, oh, you could see him developing into a nice little dual threat quarterback in this league. And you look on the defense side of the ball, I was saying it all offseason that the defense is going to be better than expected. They're better than even I expected, who was high on the Eagles defense, good enough to stay in games with teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think that the Eagles are better than people think, and I think the Eagles are going to finish second in the division, which is crazy because a lot of people had them as the worst team in the league. Not going to make the playoffs, but definitely trending up. You got to feel good about the season so far if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan compared to what you expected it to look like at this point. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it is time. And they're treading water a little bit this year, and they're an average football team this year, depending on the defense to just dominate games for their victories. Big Ben, it's over, man. It's done. It's time to retire, and it's time to bring in a new quarterback. And I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know how they're going to rebuild this team. Juju is also on a one-year deal, and he just got a season-ending injury recently. So it's all going bad for the Steelers, and I think Juju might be leaving the team. I think Big Ben's going to be retiring, and I think any other veterans that are on this team that are contemplating retiring are going to retire or leave the team. Denver Broncos. I'm actually going to put them in the trending up category. And I say that because I think that this team is not in a rebuild. I think that they got the guys on the roster to be really good right now, and they're a quarterback away. And if they bring in a guy like an Aaron Rodgers, or they bring in a guy, they somehow get their hands on Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, this team's ready to compete for the entire conference right this second. They got the guys on defense. They got the guys on offense. Obviously, last night was not the best performance, but when you really sit down and look at it, I mean, Teddy Bridgewater couldn't move the ball. They only gave up 17 points to a team that ran for like 200 yards. They bended. They didn't break, though, down on the goal line. So I think that they're trending up, and I think that once they get that quarterback that's going to be the future, it's not Teddy Bridgewater, obviously. It's not Drew Lock, obviously. It's going to be off to the races for the horses, and not excited about it. Green Bay Packers, like I said earlier, I have no reason to change my NFC pick. I had a feeling about this team in the offseason, and it's just like a little gut feeling, and maybe the G stands for gut feeling, that the Green Bay Packers were going to get it done this year, and Aaron Rodgers was going to come out with a new kind of motivation after all the drama that happened in the offseason. But I really do think that this Green Bay Packers team is going to run it in the NFC and go to the Super Bowl. They've been in the NFC Championship game multiple seasons in a row now. I don't know why everyone's just kind of just writing them off. I don't see very many Green Bay to the Super Bowl takes. I actually see a lot of Tampa Bay, Los Angeles Rams, and even more Cardinals to the Super Bowl takes than the Green Bay Packers. This team is going to get healthy eventually, and they're going to be even more dominant than they've been so far this year so far. And they're 5-1. There's no reason for me to change this pick. I knew the Buccaneers were going to be good, and I knew the Rams were going to be good. And if you had to tell me to predict it, I would predict all of these teams to be 5-1 right now, and I would predict all these teams to look exactly the way they've looked in the games so far this season. And I still picked Green Bay in the preseason, so there's no reason to change it. Give me Green Bay. Now in the AFC, however, I picked Kansas City. There's lots of reasons to change it. Carolina, another team. They started off 3-0. While they've slid recently, I think that they're in the trending up category, and they're close to a bubble playoff team. Honestly, they probably are a bubble playoff team, but definitely some promise here out of the Panthers' offense and defense. The defense has been amazing so far this year, and even though they're in a losing streak of 3 games in a row, you still did not expect this team to start 3-0, and I don't think I expected this team to even be 3-3, and I think at the end of the year they're going to be around that 500 mark, not quite making the playoffs or not quite a playoff team, but I think they're going to be right there. The Raiders. I'm putting the Raiders in the bubble playoff team category. I'm a big Raider hater and a big Raider doubter, and I had them winning 5 games in the offseason. As a Chargers fan, I obviously don't want to see the Raiders succeed too much, but there's something there in Las Vegas this year. And even the biggest Raider hater on the internet cannot deny them from being a bubble playoff team at the very minimum. And I think that we're going to see 3 teams from the AFC West this year, possibly in the playoffs. Washington, I don't know what you guys thought this season was going to be. You went 7-9 last year, made the playoffs because the division was so bad. Like, that's cool that you made the playoffs. You would never have made the playoffs in a normal NFL season. This team was in a rebuild last year. They were in a rebuild the year before. And they're in a rebuild this year. They're trying to find a quarterback. They've got a bunch of young players that were overperforming last year and still only went 7-9. This team is in a rebuild. They're in the middle of a rebuild. There is no reason not to think they're in the middle of a rebuild. And I apologize that the logo is not updated. This is on the tier list website. Maybe I'll edit in the logo over it. Anyways, Cardinals. Locked playoff team. I'm not going to put them in Super Bowl contenders yet, although if they keep winning and if they beat some more good teams, I'll be ready to move them up Super Bowl contenders. This team reminds me of that breakout Chiefs team that lost to the Patriots in the playoffs a couple years ago and then started to get really dominant the years after. And I think that this is kind of what that year is for the Cardinals. And in the next couple of years, they're going to be competing for the Super Bowl. There is a really good mix of veterans to youth, but I still think that the mix isn't quite balanced. So I think that they could be overperforming a little bit, and come playoff time, they may run into a buzzsaw in Tampa or a buzzsaw in Los Angeles or a buzzsaw in Green Bay. Even if they saw Dallas, like I said, I think I might even take the Cowboys there. It's a tough game. Buffalo Bills, they are still Super Bowl contenders. Even though they lost to Tennessee, they were 1 yard away from beating Tennessee. This team played their worst game of the year against Tennessee Titans, and they lost by 1 yard. So I still feel really good about this Bills team. I still feel they're going to be competing in the AFC, and I would definitely take them over the Kansas City Chiefs as a Super Bowl contender in the AFC right this second. Seattle Seahawks. Sorry, guys. It is time to rip off the Band-Aid. Everything on this team signifies they need to start a rebuild. The O-line is bad. It's hard to rebuild an O-line when you're cap-strapped. The defense is awful. It's hard to rebuild a defense when you're cap-strapped every single offseason. And the problem is also that they're trading draft picks away to acquire players like Jamal Adams, so they can't even bring in cheaper good players through the draft, which is what you like to do, to rebuild this team or keep this team going at the pace that they've been going for the last decade. The Seahawks had a great run. They won a Super Bowl. They went to Super Bowls. It's time to rip off the Band-Aid, accept that we need to go into a long-term rebuild, trade Russell Wilson, and let's go ahead and start this rebuild. Whether Pete Carroll wants to retire or not, doesn't matter. The Seahawks need to start this rebuild. Otherwise, they're going to keep doing this thing where they're a good team because Russell Wilson and this offense with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and Chris Carson when he's healthy, they can carry them to some victories. But come playoff time with no defense, and come time when you guys see really good teams with no defense, it's just not going to happen. And no O-line, it's just not going to happen. We saw what happened to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl last year. So either keep losing in the playoffs, in the first and second round of the playoffs, and just continually doing that over and over and over and over again and never reaching the Super Bowl and wasting the rest of Russell Wilson's career, or rip off the Band-Aid, let's rebuild, let's get a new quarterback, let's start developing him, and let's get some cheaper players in here so that way we're not so cap-strapped every offseason to bring in players that can actually contribute to victories. And Jamal Adams, amazing acquisition. And I'm not a Jamal Adams hater. I'm a Jamal Adams realist. He's not going to completely transform the defense. So it's time to rip off that Band-Aid and move on. Jets are currently in a rebuild. They got the young quarterback. They brought in a ton of players. Jets fans had some kind of hope of winning like 6, 7, 8 games this year. Sorry, guys. And it's sad that that's what you hold on to and look for hope in is 6, 7, 8 wins. And I feel bad for you guys, but you just got to be a little bit more patient. At least they're going the right direction with the rebuild. I feel like they had a really good offseason. Huge question marks with Zach Wilson. He's starting to look a lot like Drew Lock, who's a guy I was very against. But I keep telling everyone, be patient with Zach Wilson. He does have the arm talent. He's just got to groom the rest of his game, and maybe he can in New York. Hopefully the coaching staff is helping him out more than previous coaching staffs have helped out previous Jets quarterbacks. And the last one is the New England Patriots. And what do the Patriots need to do? They need to, well, they're kind of in a rebuild. I mean, it's not really time to start a rebuild because they're in a rebuild, right? I mean, they're like a better than rebuilding team, and they're going to play better than a rebuilding team. But really, they just brought in a rookie quarterback and got rid of the veteran quarterback that was there previously. They brought in young, unproven receivers, 2 tight ends that have showed promise that are young and unproven as well. Defensive side of the ball, they still have the veteran guys there, but they also are leaning on guys like Kyle Duggar pretty heavily to play very well, and J.C. Jackson, young guys that are developing as well still in their career. So I think the Patriots are just in a rebuild right now. And they're overperforming in that rebuild, probably just because of strategy, scheme, and Bill Belichick being Bill Belichick. That's my tier list. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I just wanted to hop on real quick for like 30 minutes and rank all these teams. We are at the mid-season mark, and we are getting closer and closer to where we can start thinking about the playoffs being in the very, very near future. And all these teams need to start assessing where their seasons are going to go from here and what they really want to do and what their objectives are for the rest of the year. Because I definitely think based on where you're ranked in this tier, you should have different objectives for the rest of this NFL season. Help me out real quick by hitting the like button before you go and subscribe and turn on notifications. It's the biggest thing you can do to help our channel grow and help our lives get closer to becoming sports talkers, whatever you want to call us, fans that talk into cameras and microphones. I'll see you guys next time on the random video that I make. I don't know what it's going to be or when it's going to be, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen eventually. If you want to hang out with us, we're going to be live tomorrow for Fantasy Football Speakeasy and Fantasy Football Boot Camp, back-to-back doubleheader fantasy football. And then in the mornings, on Sunday mornings with the Fantasy Football Wake-Up Call, doing your starts and sits right before kickoff. So come on over to the Warzone Sports Network YouTube channel for that live stream and check us out for that. That's all from me. I'm Mike, and I'm on the mic, and this is me saying, until next time.
I gave you fair warning, beware, beware.
Smack him in the mouth.
I gave you fair warning, beware, beware.
Smack him in the mouth.